now we're looking at Wisconsin. Okay, and it looks to be the typical Wisconsin team. Not going to throw it a whole lot. Graham Mertz, we're still waiting for him to show up on a big stage and do something against a quality opponent. He gained all sorts of great, tremendous reviews from Jerry Kill, the opposing coach, this past weekend, and of course his own coach Paul Chryst. But it was against New Mexico State in a 1,000,000 game, 1,000,000 to 7, I think, was the final score. So here we got Graham Mertz on the big stage, and we've got Braelon Allen, who, if you're not familiar with him and what he did at the age of 17 to start the season last year at Wisconsin, is crazy, folks. He is a tremendous running back. And of course, despite a loss to Washington State, and if you look into that game, that was a lot of red zone mistakes, issues in which Wisconsin, I heard this on the Big Ten Network, 78-0 prior to the Washington State game, when they gained at least 400 yards, held the opposition to less than 300, and they were at 401 to 253. But just again, red zone mistakes, penalties, and un-Wisconsin type play led to an upset loss as an 18-point favorite at home. So, Kevin, Wisconsin, set us up. What do you think of the Badgers? It looks to be the typical Wisconsin team.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of plug and play. I think there are some positions this year, maybe not as strong as other years. I mean, their linebackers are fantastic. One of their outside linebackers, Nick Herbig, I think is probably one of the better players in the entire Big Ten on defense. I like a couple of the guys on their defensive line. Keanu Benton, big nose tackle, is somebody who's fun to watch. They're a little dinged up in the secondary. That's one of the things. There's something floating around on the internet that they're down 3 starters, which is not entirely true. Whereas you think, okay, these are guys that started the season and now are out. One guy got hurt during the spring and just never really was able to go. I mean, they are down another guy for sure. Point being, they are a little thin in the secondary. On the offensive side of the ball, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, obviously, Graham Mertz is the guy that needs to get things going at quarterback. He emerged on the scene as a freshman against Illinois on like a Friday night game and looked really good and hasn't looked good since. I mean, he has his moments against inferior competition where he puts up some decent numbers, but, there are a lot of Wisconsin fans that are not sure that he's the answer. They have a real 3-headed monster at running back with Braelon Allen, Ches Malusi, and then a third guy who's a senior who, I thought was more of like a complimentary player, but had a chance to see him run a little bit against New Mexico State and was impressed with him. I struggle to name many of their receivers, and that's kind of been a very Wisconsin type of thing outside of Danny Davis, who just happened to be from Ohio, and we knew who he was. Well, Danny Davis has moved on. I'm still struggling to name any of their receivers. So, it's they have their systems. Jim Leonard, I mean, still running that defense, and in doing so, kind of know what you're going to get there. But, maybe not the same Wisconsin team that we saw in 2019 when Ohio State faced them in the Big Ten championship game. But take this team lightly at your own risk.
Yeah, I asked Coach Day yesterday. I mean, 2019 was the last time they played. So 3/4 of this Ohio State team has never lined up and played against Wisconsin. They played them twice that year. They blew them out 38-7 earlier in the year in Columbus. And that was the game Chase Young, I think, had 4 sacks, and that kind of thrust him into the Heisman Trophy talk. And he ended up getting a finalist vote out of probably that one game on national television against a pretty good Wisconsin team. They played again in the rematch, and that came a few days after Ohio State had gone up to Michigan. And I want to say, did they win that game 56-27, or was that the 62 maybe that was the 62-38 game? I don't know, whatever it was. I get all
right the first time.
It was the 56-27 game
at Michigan. Yep.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure what Ohio State's mindset was going into that game, but other than I think they knew that if they won, they were in the playoff. Certainly, when they did win, they were in the playoff. I'm not sure what was going through their mind because they showed up and didn't play the first half, got woefully outplayed 21-7 at halftime. And as the legend has it, it was the walk-on wide receiver Saunders from Dublin Kaufman who lit everybody up in the locker room at halftime and kind of pulled everybody together in that massive NFL locker room. It's the size of a small country there at Lucas Oil Stadium. You probably could hear him echoing from one end of it to the other, but he got everybody kind of centered and said, we got to go win the second half and we got to go win this game. And they just blew Wisconsin's doors off in the second half. I think it was 27-0 in the second half, and they won the game 34-21 and went on obviously to the playoff and lost to Clemson. But, Wisconsin can play with anybody and beat anybody, or they can lose to anybody on any given Saturday, it seems like. I mean, we've seen them have some great teams over the years and lose to some really crappy Northwestern teams. And, they lost to Illinois a couple years ago at Champaign in some fluky BS game over there. And, Illinois is terrible. I mean, has been in recent years. And so, them losing to Washington State, I guess history will tell us what Washington State turns out to be. They kind of beat themselves in that game. They had the ball going in the red zone, and Clay Cundiff, who's their star tight end, had the ball knocked away from him there in the red zone, and they turned it over with 5 minutes to go, and the defense couldn't get a stop. Washington State just lined up and ran out the last 5 minutes, and that was that. So they had 3 turnovers in that game. They actually are throwing the ball a little bit better this year. Chimere Dike, I think, is their top wide receiver, 9 catches, and Skylar Bell is not bad either. Then they got 2 really good tight ends, Clay Cundiff and Hayden Rucci. Those 4 guys are the main targets for Graham Mertz. I think they threw for more yards last week, like 335 yards total against New Mexico State than they have in any other game in the Paul Chryst era, or the second most, maybe the most passing yards and second most points, 66 points in the Paul Chryst era last week against New Mexico State. Of course, kind of like Ohio State and Toledo, you can take all that, bundle it up, take that, tear it in half, and throw both halves away because none of it means anything when you enter Big Ten play. But, just a feel that Wisconsin's dangerous. They're unranked. They lost to Washington State. None of that matters.